Like, and then I wonder why I've done this my whole life. So, but anyway, that's a whole other story. We're getting into your story. So, thank you for taking a minute out today. And I want to cover, I want to cover what we've lived through for the last 4 years, which has been a global pandemic. How did you get through it, and how did it change you?
Well, how did I get through it? It's a good question. I got pretty lucky actually because I was training speakers, and when the pandemic came along and they were like, "Well, everybody's got to stay inside." I moved my business online, and it just turned out that I was good at training speakers online. And since all the students now didn't go to school, I just had an endless supply of students that I was working with from Canada, China, Brazil, Australia. And literally just was working, sitting in my office for 8 hours a day, training back to back to back to back to back students going all day. And then I got like these super side pains, right? Because I was sitting all day. I wasn't working out or anything.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, I think I'm dying. And I went, got some acupuncture on my side, fixed it up. So the pandemic was really good to me, actually.
Yeah. I hear that a lot. So I'm curious, in your line of work, if we were to get to the actual essence of what you do on a daily basis, I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders. It's career day. And one of the kids asks you, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
I I train speakers. I tell kids that or I tell everybody this. It's like basketball. A lot of people like to play basketball. You go to a basketball training camp. Yeah, you can dribble, and yes, you can probably shoot, and you shot in your backyard a lot. But now you work with a trainer. The trainer teaches you even a more improved way to dribble and pass and shoot and play the game of basketball. Well, that's what I do for speakers. I give them exercises. I give them that they can use to practice on everyday conversations. I give them joke setups. I give them hook phrases. I hypnotic storytelling secrets, and I give them the world of speaking, just like a basketball trainer would do for basketball.
So what did you want to be when you were in the third grade? What was your dream to grow up and become?
Man, I was a small town kid. Are you in a small town or big town?
Well, I grew up in a small town, but I live in a big town now.
Yeah, yeah, me too. I was a small town kid, and I was pretty shy of people actually, new people. And my mom told me that I wanted to be a daddy rabbit.
Okay.
I never became one. I never
Right.
became a
Yeah.
daddy rabbit. I didn't know what I wanted, you know. I would look out at the world, and my dad worked in a sawmill, and it was a very blue collar town, and I always wanted to have wealth and be rich, but it felt like I didn't know how to get it. So I tried a bunch of different things. I had an internet, but we had the old dial up internet when I was a kid, like,
Oh yeah.
and then I started an internet business when we had that kind of internet. But
Yeah.
then it turned out it wasn't an internet business, and I just got a bunch of products for like health products, mainly for older people. And I was like 17 years old, so I didn't use any of them. They all stacked up, and yeah, I just kind of I did a bunch of different careers, and I failed a bunch of businesses along the way, actually.
So, how did you get into this line of work? Take me back to where you were born and raised, and kind of what were the seeds that made you a guru to help people to successfully speak to others? How did that happen?
Hmm. So I worked in a sawmill when I was like 18 years old or 19 years old. And I used to tell those guys, I'm not going to work here. I'm doing big things. Da 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 da. And they'd all, one day I decided to quit, right? And they were all like, you're coming. You'll be back here. Give you a year. You'll be back here. And I was riding my street bike home that night, last night of work, quit my job. I was going across Canada on some youth trip. And bam, a pickup truck rear ended my street bike. It was a guy that I worked with, actually.
Wow.
And I flew almost the half the length of a football field, flew that far, and then when I hit the head, when I hit the pavement, I started rolling, and my helmet popped off my head, and I had this came right out of my body, had an outer body experience, and I heard this voice, "You're not gonna die, you're not gonna die." Woke up for 1 second on the pavement, passed out, then I woke up in the hospital like a few days later. I didn't know who I was, where I was, or any of that. So what happened from there was I went into what I call the victim system, because you start dealing with like doctors and lawyers, and they send you to more doctors, and everybody's like, let's talk about the problem. So it because I did have a bunch of brain problems. I couldn't remember I couldn't look up for like about 8 months. I couldn't even look up because it would make my get lightheaded. I'd get vertigo and just pass out. And going through that process, and every time I'd go to a doctor's, they would say, oh, you have PTSD, oh, you have this, oh, you have that, take these pills, take those pills. And so I never took the pills, but I had a bunch of prescriptions in my back pocket. And one day I went to my mom. I'm like, Mom, if I buy a house, because where I'm from, there's another city, Prince George is called. If I buy a house in Prince George and rent it out to university students, will you help me put the down payment on? Because it was like about 80,000 at the time, right? So down payment wasn't a lot of money. And she said, yeah, okay. And I said, we'll flip it in 5 years, get our money back. So I bought that house and I rented out to college students. Everything went as planned. And in that time frame of like 5 years, I met this guy who was a drug dealer, and he sold. I'm getting to how I got to speaking,
Yeah,
okay?
sure. Yeah, yeah.
So he recruited me to sell like drugs, like cocaine. I started hanging out with the bikers and going around, driving around the city, and I got super into it, like really, really badly, into like everyday kind of deal. And after going through my life, after 7 years of that, I was in a really bad place. I had some really high ups and really down lows. I chased a girl to the city, started knocking doors. We had like $1,000 days, but then when I had $1,000 days, the drug would just increase instrumentally. And then one day I was just in a dark, deep, dark place. I didn't know who I was, and I started writing a book. And I read that book. I was like, that's not how I feel. And I was like, went back and I rewrote this book. And I tell people I wrote myself out of that. I wrote myself out of everything, and I've started writing myself into who I wanted to become. And then I said to myself, I want to be a speaker. And that's how it started. That's how it
Wow.
started. So I yeah. I never published that book yet. That was 10 years ago. I wrote it, never
Wow.
published it.
Who's your favorite speaker?
Les Brown.
Okay. What's the best speech you've ever seen with your own eyes?
Oh, that's a really good question. I've seen so many speeches with my own eyes. One that really stands out, he was from Dubai, and he was doing a keynote. And listen, this is a long, long time ago, so it's hard for me to chalk together. But the thing that stood out about it was he used four shapes in his talk. And when he was first opening up, he was explain he said, who here likes the square, and who here likes a rectangle, and who here likes a circle. And then he so people put up their hand, oh, I'm a circle guy, or I'm a rectangle guy, or a girl, or whoever you are. I like the square. And then afterward, he went through each of those ones, like what they meant. And he got to circle, which was most everybody who put up their hand for circle. And he said, those are the people who are here for the free food and drink. I just loved how he set him up, and I can't remember all of the about it, but just the way that he set that up, it was really a memorable talk. He had like the groups would get together, like he had the tables get together. I love keynotes where they have people interacting and getting together and doing different like exercises as a group.
You know, it's interesting. One of the most profound speeches I ever witnessed was former President Bill Clinton was at a presidential library. And when he walked in, it was like two people opened the door. It was like the particles in the room changed. And I still remember parts of the speech. He was talking about renewable energy, putting solar panels on buildings in New York City, because that's by where his office was. And I still remember how he went through this whole chain of like saving the planet from all of this bad environmental doom and how we can do it, but being hopeful. Anyway, but he is just such a powerful speaker anyway, so it just
It's
it made sense. Um,
it's crazy the presence that like he would have, or like anybody in that position, like the presence they have when the doors open. Like
oh man,
you don't realize the energy that comes with that sort of like stature or presence, right?
yeah,
It's
yeah,
crazy.
it's amazing. I mean, I've talked to people that have interviewed Mandela and been around magnanimous people, and they say that everything around them is different. Every
Hmm.
every feeling, everything that's in that room is just changed, So
Yeah.
it it
Yeah.
happens. There is a select few out there that can pull that off pretty magnanimously. Um, so what pulled you through in the hospital? Who's been kind of a hero for you in your life, in that dire moment, and just in general for being inspired to go after a new career and to help others be inspired? Who's been the hero for you?
My dad is my hero. I I just grew up on a farm. I watched this guy cut down trees. He cut them down, ran them through a homemade saw, not a homemade, but he had his own home sawmill. He cut them all into lumber, planed them all, tongue and grooved them all, built his house, did plumbed his house. Like you don't hear people be a jack of all trades anymore because now we're all very specialized. I do this, I do that. Even for me as a speaker, people are like, well, what do you speak about? I'm like, oh, I'm a speaker trainer. Oh, that's not good enough. What do you talk about? I'm like, well, I talk about presence and stage presence and body language. Like they're so specific. But my dad just, I don't know how he built a house or did any of that, but he had this, he's crazy. It's crazy watching someone like that go through life and just he lives in the country and builds everything. And I just grew up around that. I grew up helping him my whole life. And he just instilled a lot of really like solid ground values into me.
As a guy, I am intrigued by people that can pull that off because I can. Like I hear people that are like, I built a house. It's like, look, I'm trying to get weather sealant on a window. All right. That's all. That's all I want to do. I'm trying to screw in the cabinet so it's not all weird and lopsided. All right. And then I'm happy.
Oh, you and I are alike, my friend. We are alike.
So let me ask you this. If you can meet one person alive on the planet right now and spend some time with them, someone that you find inspirational, who would that be?
Ooh, that's hey, you should have prepared me for these questions.
Well, I was gonna say you mentioned Les Brown, so I figured you already had kind of the baton going around the track. I
Yeah,
figured it
yeah.
would be,
No, I would love. I once went to an event just to meet Les Brown, and then he didn't show up to that event, so it was
oh
such a
no.
bummer. He's one of the But if I were to think about someone that I would really want to sit down and pick their brain, I mean, it would. Man, I don't know. Maybe I think it would be like someone like Gary V or someone that I could
Yeah.
get some business advice from or steal some juice or just get in their energy flow.
So let me ask you this: of all of the people that you've helped, what's been one of your best success stories?
Well, I'll tell you one. It's probably not my best one, but it's one that had the most really impact in my training career. It was actually just before the pandemic because I had been training for a while, and I'd been training students and I was training sales managers. But there was this international speaking competition that came into that came into my awareness, and I was like, well, I'm going to enter a bunch of students into it. So a bunch of students came to me and I started preparing them for this international speaking competition. And we get to the venue. It's a huge venue, and none of these kids had spoke before, like in front of people. They'd all just been with me, but I'd been training them for this competition. And we went in there, and there were like six judges on the panel, and there's a couple hundred people in the room, cameras all over the place, and it was a pretty high stress situation. And these kids that I put out there, they cleaned up all the trophies in each section of the younger ones cleaned up the trophies, the middle ones cleaned up the trophies, and the older ones cleaned up the trophies. They got all kinds of trophies and awards. And when that happened, it was insane because after that, my business just took off and I didn't have to do anything.
That's great. So, of all of the things that you've done in your life, you've obviously had to overcome a lot. You've accomplished a lot. You've evolved as a professional. What are you the proudest of?
Ooh, I like your questioning. Proudest of. I'm almost like just proud of where I am right now. Like right now I'm going after keynotes, speaking at associations, really starting to charge my fees that the value that I bring to the audiences that I talk in front of. And I'm just proud that I got here because it was a dream since I was a little kid to be, even though I didn't know it at the time, because I didn't know what I wanted to be exactly. But now I'm just starting to realize that it has been manifesting in me this whole time. So no matter how low the low was or how high the high was, somehow I just kept on going forward. And I feel like right now I'm in a position where I wanted to be 20 years ago, but now that I'm here, I'm so proud of being here, and I just love that I'm here, and I love that I'm chatting with you and doing podcasts, and now I'm building my brand and my business, and it's really energizing.
So let's say you have a dream tonight. You run into the version of you 20 years ago, and you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on the wisdom you've gained, the life you've led, the things you've overcome. What advice would you impart on that young version of you?
Hmm. I mean, unfortunately, I'd have to tell that young version not to sell drugs and not to, and just to avoid that whole temptation, because it's not like I got into him because I was negative or anything. Like, I've always been a very positive person. Like, I just enjoyed it and the scene and the girls and the money and all of that. But the thing is that went really dark.
Yeah.
And if I could have just avoided that and stayed into the sports, I love playing sports, I was a natural athlete. If I could have stuck with that, I just feel like I would have had a much more, I don't know. It's hard to say, but I feel like I would be quicker to where I wanted to get to.
So speaking of sports, if you could go back in time and see one game, one sports game in the annals of sports history, where are you going?
Oh, where are you going? Just out of curiosity.
I'm going to go to the 1986 World Series, Shea Stadium, Game 6, the moment that ball went underneath Billy Buckner's legs. I want to feel that euphoria. I love the Mets then. I'm from Kansas City and we won it in 85, but my dad was raised in Long Island, born in Brooklyn, raised in Long Island. So I had an affinity and I love the 86 Mets. But if I could have just watched that happen and feel that place lose its mind, I would have been I would have been delivered.
That's a cool experience, being a part of, like, just to give another time and place in Vancouver. I can't remember what year it was. They were the Vancouver Canucks. I think they're playing hockey. I think it was Canada versus the USA, actually,
Yeah.
somewhere around 2010. And I just remember the whole city was lit up. No matter where you were in that moment. And when we beat the USA, like, everybody was just so fired up, and I can even remember where I was at when I was watching that game, and I would like to be at that game, like, live. It would be amazing experience.
I did one of the first times I asked this question, I asked, and I think it may have been the first time I asked it. The guy I asked said, I want to be at that 1980 game when the US beat the Soviets. And I said, what do you mean you want to be at it again? He was there. I'm like, dude, you got to be kidding me. Because there's no one on the planet that thought we were going to beat the Russians. No one, except those kids on the ice that were all a bunch of ding dong college kids, probably half drunk already. And those were the only ones. But no one in the country that had half a brain was like, no one's going to beat the Russians. So to feel that kind of euphoria would be unreal, you know. So,
Yeah,
um, but and I think that's the fun thing about being in a Super Bowl town. We're getting geared up for next weekend and just seeing all of these things that are everywhere. Downtown is bathed in red. There's inflatables. Everybody's wearing shirts. It's like in this politically divided world we're in, we can all agree on sports or music. We can all say, you know what? This is good.
that is so true. And I wish that we don't have that kind of culture here in Vancouver. I mean, there is a hockey culture, but it's not prevalent. Like, you don't just feel like, for where you're at, like you say, in the bouncy castles. I wish we had a little bit more of that sort of team spirit going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love
I
the football spirit.
it's pretty cool, and we're pretty gonzo anyways. I mean, the game that we played to kick this off was the only home game against Miami, and it was at game time 5 below. By the time the game was over, it
Yeah.
was 20 below.
Yeah, Exactly.
It's like,
Exactly.
that's
And
commitment.
that is and it's filled. Like people
Yes.
love it.
And they
Oh
were
my
loud.
God.
My stepdaughter and her boyfriend went like on a whim because tickets were cheap. They waived processing fees. When you don't have a lot of money, you got to go for the golden ring. And they said that place was nuts, like
Yeah.
loud, crazy. There was dudes that had their shirts off, which is idiotic because that's just it's too much. But it's that spirit. It's like no matter what happens, we're going down with the Titanic, or we're gonna live to tell about it.
Yeah. I
So
love that spirit. I really do. I miss having that sort of spirit in sports. And one time I was in Belgium visiting my cousin, and we were at it was Belgium versus I can't remember another country. And I thought it wasn't a really big game. It wasn't huge but it was crazy when you were there.
yeah,
People they had to separate the fans because they didn't want them fighting. They had rioting
wow,
police outside of the thing. And it was one of the first events where I went to, and the whole time was just oh, like just a chant
yeah,
for the whole time. And I
yeah,
wasn't chanting. My cousin was like, "Are you not enjoying yourself?" Like, I don't know the
wow,
chant.
yeah, right,
I don't.
yeah,
I don't know what's going on.
yeah. It's like you walked into the church chorus. It's like, how am I supposed to
Yeah,
know these hymnals? I just got here. What are you talking about?
exactly, exactly. That's what it's like for you with your football. I love it so much.
Yeah, it's great. So let me ask you this. Everyone out there has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, I think that I am. Well, definitely gregarious and outgoing, but I really think that about myself is that I have my most confidence when I get on stage and when it's go time. Like that it's like that's where I feel happy. That's my happy place. When I'm training, when I'm working with even a big audience and nobody knows who I am, so I have to win them over all the time. And then when I get up there and do that, I guess that would be what makes me feel amazing. And so when I think about that person, that would be the sort of this gregarious, energetic ideology that I developed over time.
Yeah, for sure. So Devin, if anyone out there wants to reach out, hire you, learn more about you, where do they go?
Yeah, then go to my website, devinbisanz.com. Uh, Hard to spell, Devin Bisanz. And
I
yeah,
know the
I do
feeling.
it.
My
Yeah, yeah.
last name's a juggernaut.
How do you say it?
Domino.
Dimino.
Yeah.
Dimino. But it would be hard to spell if you just heard it.
It's too many vowels, man. It's like I would be okay if I was on Wheel of Fortune, but in regular life, it's bad, you know?
Yeah,
So,
yeah. What's your background?
um, I got into journalism originally, and I'm an IT guy by day. So, oh, you mean as far as like the name? The name's 100%. It's Italian. My great grandparents came here from Italy, and my dad was 100%. So I'm 50. The other half is English, Irish, Scottish. So,
Oh,
but
you're an Italian. I
yeah,
love it. I dated an Italian for a long time.
okay, yeah.
First
There,
time I met her dad, he said, "My daughter doesn't move out till she's married."
that sounds just like an older Italian dude. Sounds makes
Really?
sense. Yeah, totally makes sense. Well, hey man, Devin, this has been wonderful. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your story. Best of luck with everything. I appreciate it, man.
Joe, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for the great questioning. Love it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, man. Take care.